Well, Indian work culture is appreciated all over the world for, doing all it takes to complete a project, meet deadlines, overwork to such an extent that you keep throwing deadlines at us and we keep delivering because we are sincere workers. That's the sad part, right? Indians largely feel overworking is sincere. We don't even believe it's exploitation. These are exactly the debates that are panning out on social platforms, where Indians are comparing Indian work culture with European work culture now. So here's the story. There are two kinds of work cultures in the world. In one, when the office clock strikes 6, people shut their laptops, say goodbye, and go home. And in another culture, the laptop goes home with you. The office comes to your dining table, your manager enters your bedroom through your WhatsApp. Your Sunday is not really a Sunday, it's basically unpaid leave. You're basically working from home. It's not even your day off. It's work from home without attendance. And sadly, millions of Indians do not even consider this as exploitation because they feel overworking is sincere behavior. And in India, we've really began to romanticize overwork. We've normalized it to such an extent that we feel that that's the gold standard. We've built an entire moral system around availability because the moment someone says that, I have to go home, that's all, I'm done with work today, then that's viewed as arrogance. If I say, I'm going to complete this tomorrow morning when I come back to office, that's looked at unprofessional because you're supposed to, that's normalized. You're supposed to be completing all that they've presented to you right that day. Extend your work hours, but complete it. If you say no, then you're not agile, you're not compatible and whatnot. You're going to be thrown at many names. And that's why a viral post now has hit such a nerve on Reddit, where an employee uploaded a screenshot of a conversation with his company's director of sales. An Indian employee working late into the night sent a work update after midnight India time, as his company worked with companies that required regular coordination across time zones. So in response, the Europe-based executive, who he was basically chatting with, the Europe-based executive saw that this Indian employee was working way beyond his hours. And he asked the employee, and he's shared that screenshot as well. He says, "Isn't it already close to midnight for you?" And then the employee confirmed that yes, indeed, it's well beyond his working hours, but no, don't worry, I'll get this done as soon as possible. So the pleasant response from the European manager was that, "Isn't this your time to go home? Stop working." That was his response. "Stop working. It's time to stop working." And he accompanied that with a smiley as well. That's what you see in the last line. So this has now exploded on platforms like Reddit, where Indian employees are indulging themselves in conversation as to how different Indian work culture and European work culture is. In fact, this Indian employee also noted that while he was personally invested in his work and willing to stay long hours, he felt so good that a manager across timelines, in fact in another foreign country, really appreciated his working long hours. And that's such a contrast in approach with Indian bosses. That's precisely what was discussed, that Indian bosses versus European bosses, worlds apart. He posted this exchange, and then, as expected, you saw a lot of traction that it gained online. Several users praising the manager's intervention, the European manager, others sharing similar experiences from international workspaces as to how well and considerate they are towards employees, versus in India, they're largely pushed to overwork, right? And the pay as well, let's not even begin. And that civilizational gap in the meaning of work is huge. Unspoken rule of Indian offices is visibility beats balance. But in foreign countries, it's a whole different story. So why do so many Indian employees still see boundaries as disloyalty? Why is rest in India mistaken for laziness? Why is leave treated like a favor? Well, a lot of discussions around this, and I'm going to bring in Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, Global Talent Acquisition Voice, and also Dr. Sharad Kohli, founder KCC Group, who has his own company. Thanks very much, both of you. Dr. Sharad Kohli, would you want to come in on this? The debate around Indian bosses versus European bosses. Indian bosses would push you to work harder, longer, and wouldn't even appreciate it. Though a lot of Indians, of course, love what they do and they still do it. And then how you're being told, conditioned at home as well, right? Your parents say, no, you know, you got to really prove yourself, work. I'm conditioned like that. I mean, I'm not even going to speak for anyone else. I'm speaking for myself. I'm conditioned to believe that working a little, you know, extra hours, a few extra hours, and staying there, being put, not taking leave when I feel like I want to take an off. I still feel very guilty to ask for leave because I'm conditioned like that. I've been raised like that by my parents. You know, that you got to work really hard, sweat it out, and bust your yourself to make it, to grow in the profession. And I've done it through my years. Today, when I see this chatter among the Gen Z and the generations below, I mean, I believe, I wonder if I did the right thing or not. I wish I had more holidays. I wish I traveled more.
Well, good evening to you, the viewers and my fellow panelists. I think there are two sides of this coin, if you ask me honestly. One side is that Indian workers are also respected around the world for this habit, or shall I say for this conditioning. Some of the most successful guys that I know in the US and some of the other places, they have outsmarted their colleagues of that country. I mean, they are far ahead. Their promotions have gone far beyond what their colleagues are, simply because of the hard work, simply because they believe in, not that their employer wants to hold them back beyond 6 o'clock or whatever, just because they prefer to stay there on their own and finish the work and go and then take up something new tomorrow. So that's one side of the story. Well, they are conditioned that way, but they use that conditioning to their advantage for advancement of their own career. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is, yes, there is a bit of, I would say, exploitation there. When it is taken for granted, if it's an Indian employee, probably you will be able to push him to work harder. You know, you'll be able to ask him to stay back. You'll be able to ask him to work on chutti or holidays. That's the other side of the story. Well, yes, conditioning is one. Then I think traditionally, scarcity of jobs in India in earlier times, not right now, I think that somehow got embedded in the generations, and it was passed on from one generation to the other. And second is, work-life balance in this country has got little value. You know, some people just disregard the work-life balance. I think it's that work-life balance consciousness which is bringing the Gen Z to this whole concept. Which is why you find some of these Gen Zs, they refuse to work, whereas traditionally a generation before, they don't mind working. So I think it is the work-life balance consciousness. The more it gets ingrained in you, you will find that they become more conscious of their working hours. They become more conscious of their chutti, their holidays, and so and so. So I think I still see two sides of this coin. And I can tell you some of the Indian employees who've been working for longer, they are far, far ahead. Although I'm not sure if they've compromised on their family life, their personal lives, or whatever. But they're far ahead. And I'm talking of companies, you'll be surprised, companies like Microsoft, companies like Amazon, companies like Alphabet, companies like Meta. I'm talking of some of the largest companies around the world. They've beaten their colleagues by miles apart. And some of them, the CEOs which you see in these companies, I'm sorry to, I don't mean to point out at them that they must have worked harder or whatever, but they have done a lot of, I would say, burning of the midnight oil for that matter.
So you're saying overwork will always take you far?
It will, but only if you don't compromise on your work-life balance. Check out with your family, check out with your mental health. If all is well there, I don't see any harm if they've beaten their colleagues by a long way. But then, if there is someone who's probably objecting at home, who's probably complaining at home, or your own body and mind starts complaining after a while, then no, definitely a no. That's my answer.
Yeah, and you know, whatever said, I feel that ultimately, I don't know, I should not be talking about luck, and as an educated person, I shouldn't be believing in it, but I still, you know, there is an iota of luck as well. I know I see people working so hard, but just don't go anywhere, are in the same position for all their life, despite overworking, because they don't know how to negotiate well, they're not able to, you know, they're not able to say no, they can't say no, and they work. Whatever orders are given, they take it, and they work really sincerely, and you know, have lost out on family time, but just go nowhere. So those are also factors that we got to consider. I don't know if overworking is really a true and only recipe to success.
But it also, let me just add one more point to what you said. It also depends on the position the person is holding. As they climb up the corporate ladder, you find that this thing dilutes by itself. So when you're in a more commanding position, when you know you're not in a weak position vis-a-vis the corporate ladder, you tend to succumb more. But as you gain more command, as you get more control, you do not relent. That's another answer to your question.
So you're saying in your initial years, working hard is good.
Yes, it does. It matters. It does matter because once you achieve, because you see,
No, look, I mean, it's not like the 9 hours you're in office, you're not working hard. I'm talking about working after hours.
Yes, because that is treated as working hard. I mean, working hard, I mean, that is defined as working hard. That is defined, fortunately or unfortunately.
Dr. Kiran Preet, let me bring in the human resource voice here.
Well, thank you so much, Nabila. I think it's a mirror to our work culture because we see working after work hours as a structural norm, unsaid norm. And that's a way to show loyalty to the organization that I have worked for so many hours, and therefore I'm more loyal to you instead of seeing what value is being delivered or seeing the well-being of an employee. Are we really looking at productivity, or are we looking at something which is more sustainable and not causing burnout? I think this message clearly tells us it is okay to disconnect. We have a right. And I'm sorry, I disagree with Mr. Sharad saying that as you climb up the ladder, you get some relaxation there. In fact, things get tougher because now you're not holding accountability for a portion of work. Instead, you're accountable for literally everybody that, is reporting into you and whatever they do. And therefore, you're supposed to spend unsaid more hours there. So I think people are going through psychological safety concerns. They are scared. Of course, scarcity of jobs earlier was one of the concern, but I think now with that being set as a norm, people have somehow imbibed it in Indian perspective, and I think we need to move away from this where we need to talk about more outcome based performance than just presentisms. And I've seen so many people asking for appraisal. Hey, you know what? Because I work for 12 hours. Doesn't matter whether they really added any value to the organization. How did their spending 12 hours, translated to the outcome that they were supposed to share? So I slightly disagree. I see this to be a chance to learn, to outgrow our orthodox methodologies and look at performance as a sustainable measure instead of just going more towards exhaustion. I've seen people, you rightly said, Nabila, people have been working for years and still standing right there.
And I also have a question for Mr. Sharad Kohli, and since he raised his hand also, and I'm also short on time. Mr. Sharad Kohli, countries in Europe are far ahead and more developed than India is. I mean, Indian employees may be doing very well in many companies, but look at the country on the whole. If that's the culture here and that's the culture there, well, they're definitely far ahead of us.
Nabila, you'll be surprised. I've been practically to every single European country, except if I leave out one or two. And I worked there. I have seen them working. What you're saying is correct, but historically. Now things have changed. If you go and see now, their output is less than half of the Indian employees' output. One. And I like to comment upon my fellow panelists' view. There are two kinds of employees very quickly. One is who are not able to achieve their targets within the 8-9 hours. So they have to toil and work harder to deliver what they were meant to deliver on that day. There is the second category who extra deliver. They will probably try and finish their tomorrow's work today. I put them in the hardworking category. I don't put the first one in the hardworking category because they were supposed to deliver anyway. That shows your inefficiency. You were not able to complete what you were meant to do. I think it is the second category which I was talking about. And this category, believe me, Nabila, I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it in Europe, in US as well. These employees have outsmarted their colleagues by miles and miles. I've got examples here with me. Their remuneration, their position is in fact, there's a lot of envy in the minds of, I don't mean to sound racist, but these goras, they envy that. What do you guys do, yaar? How do you guys work so hard? I can't work beyond 5 p.m. I don't work on Saturdays and so and so. You keep hearing these comments, and this is the truth. So I'm talking of an efficient employee who wants to get something in life.
Indians have a large number of Indians across the world. We are number one in diabetes, heart issues. And I can go.
Yes, of course. I said that, Nabila. I said that. Didn't I say that, Nabila? I said that if you're not compromising on your personal self and on your family, you're fine to do that. But if that is happening, it's a bad idea. I agree.
Okay, okay. All right. Kiranpreet, you were last word?
I think we need to, pivot towards more relevant models, focus more towards well-being without compromising on competitiveness.
And I also
We
believe
can
that,
achieve goals.
a little break and honoring an employee's timing, respecting their boundaries also encourages them to work better, more creatively and think better, less anxious. You're also feeding into their health and therefore productivity, right? So, yeah, thanks very much, both of you, for joining us on that.